Hello and welcome once again, everybody, to our little podcast here. Of course, this is the Zero Issue podcast, talking about Tier 2 and 3 Overwatch, trying to keep you guys in the loop. Sir Waltham and Dryad here. Dryad, how are we feeling? It's been a couple weeks.
Yeah, it's definitely been exactly a couple of weeks, and there's been a bunch of things that have happened recently in regards to contenders and the scene. A lot of changes coming from teams, and also a few announcements. So I think it's been really, really interesting to see um, the excitement for the community, right? Because that's the thing that we always talk about, how much we want the community to have a good perception of what's going on in contenders, and I think that's exactly what's happening.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely am feeling very excited to see kind of the new developments that are coming through here. We're in a little bit of an interesting spot, Dryad. Given that we haven't been on in a couple of weeks, we haven't talked about anything new happening, and over that time, we've gone from obviously October to November. So there's quite a few things. Obviously we have the contenders trials and contender seasons ending for the month going into November, which I don't think we've had too much of November just yet, but still
Right.
kind of, starting to appear. We have new contenders skins coming in for the month. Contenders Gauntlet info has also come in. So a lot of stuff definitely for us to kind of go over and cover today.
Yeah, and I think I do want to start talking a little bit about the Gauntlet. I think this is the main thing happening right now. This is like huge event that everyone was expecting, and we saw a few people that were kind of sad. A few months ago, they were like really excited to go. Maybe to Korea to have the Gauntlet happening. A lot of contenders play. I remember OG specifically talking about it on Twitter, and I think it was really cool. Then nothing happened. No one really expected the Gauntlet to still take place, and then it got announced. So I think it's really, really cool opportunity for your contenders players from all regions to kind of pop off. And the announcement already was really, really cool, and that just brings a lot of excitement to the tier two scene, like we always want to.
Yeah, I mean, I'm never going to be one to go against, getting more events out there, more players who can get their names kind of spread far and wide. It's going to be, of course, the four regions. You have the Asia, South America, NA, and EU. So it's interesting to me that I mean it makes sense, right? Because there's the four different regions. Obviously, you can't have those regions competing with each other, but it seems like the regions are kind of treated a little bit differently based off of them. I know South America, I think, has the least amount of teams and the lowest prize pool that can be available. And it's just interesting to me in that dynamic. Even more interesting is the way Asia gets broken down, which is can be a little intimidating at first.
Definitely, and it's actually very lucky that because of COVID happening, all these teams can't really compete together. The top teams you're never going to see going against each other. There's all these regions, but overall, you're going to be having the top from each region coming through. And I think that's going to be really interesting. And yeah, like you mentioned about South America, every region is treated very differently depending on the demand that they have, of course, and also the resources that can be provided to every specific region. So I think that that's something that's going to be a part of it. We don't really have the details so far of how many broadcasts are going to happen to languages that are going to be broadcasted in. So of course we know there's definitely going to be the English broadcast since this is all being promoted by Elo Hell. But besides that, we're not really sure if we're going to be having other broadcasting news, maybe Chinese, Korean, for Spanish, Portuguese, all those languages also coming through. And having this opportunity to bring more excitement to the region, to contenders especially, which I think with the skins, Overwatch has done a really good job with this, and there's a lot of people watching, getting more into the scene, but there could be definitely more happening.
Yeah, and you talk about I guess the possibility for multiple different casting teams or regional I guess presenters. I think that would be something that would obviously benefit Blizzard very well. I mean, it seems like they're not just going for the best teams, right? I'm saying this primarily off of Asia, right? They're not just saying the top 10 regions or the top 10 teams in Asia, right? They're saying we're going to have four Chinese teams, four Korean, Pacific, and one Australian. So they're definitely not just trying to focus on that. They're trying to get it a little bit more globalized, which I think kind of leans them towards acknowledging that they need to have that multinational or international presence, and a wide variety of different casting and production teams would definitely help out with that.
Yeah, and we've seen it years prior where when it's happening more on a regional level, we see the broadcast from every region really coming through. Pretty much it's always the same contenders casters that we've seen before covering this, and of course it makes sense just because they have more knowledge on the teams and the players specifically. But when it comes to that international part of the gauntlet, where we've seen teams from Korea and teams from NA competing against each other, like we saw last year, that's when you want to have as many languages as possible. I think this is really important. This is something that I personally like pushing forward because I think you can create the excitement for the gauntlet because it's a huge event. It's really, really cool to have all these players competing and having this unique tournament. And it's something that also connects anyone. You can connect the South American region to the Asian region, and even when they're completely different, you can bring that connection. And if you're going to be having this broadcasted in different languages, you can maybe explain a little bit to maybe the South American region. They're listening, they know about their own scene. But do you tell them these are the best teams in Korea, these are the best teams in China, and they are doing really good because of this? This is the meta that's being played, because that's also something that's really, really important, that teams, and depending on the region, they decide to play different metas, and they all have their own meta, and it really affects them when they play against each other.
Yeah, it's fascinating, right? You have the teams like, I think EU kind of gets that rep as being very fast meta adopters, or they seem to, be very cued into, their own style of it. And, seeing that go up against potentially, North American, South American, or Asian teams, it's going to be a very unique dynamic if we do end up seeing it. One thing that also kind of, I don't want to say raises some flags, but it's peculiar to me is kind of the large amount of overlap we're seeing for these teams. We have that some group stages are going to be overlapping. Like, for example, North America, Europe, and South America are all taking place at least partially from December 4th to the 6th. So there's going to be a lot of time to just kind of have to keep tuned in for this gauntlet. And I'm hoping that they'll be able to maintain that kind of uh, equilateral coverage for each region, as opposed to just favoring the ones that they might perceive as more popular.
Yeah, and I do understand both the two perspectives that you can have in this aspect, where NA and EU are going to get a huge amount of viewership compared to other regions, maybe SA. But when you give, for example, SA, when you give Australia a little bit more attention, that's more resources that are going into them, and that's an ideal situation that they want to have. They want to feel like they belong also in the gauntlet. They also are getting the representation that they want. So yeah, like you mentioned, I think it's going to be really interesting to see what matches are going to be broadcasted, how many broadcasts are going to happen at the same time, and the different languages that I already mentioned a little bit. But it's definitely, the more international you can make it, the better it's going to be.
Yeah, I don't think that's a very controversial opinion for anybody to take away here. Obviously, more eyes is always going to be better for Blizzard, for the game, for the competitive scene, for esports in general. And I think there's going to be around the realm of 42 teams. Let me do some quick math here. I know it's 10 for Asia, 8 for South America. That's 18 plus 24 for North America and Europe combined. 18, 24, 42. So those 42 teams, I think that'll get them some pretty good brand recognition. And I like the concept of South American teams in particular getting a lot of that attention, because I feel like that's a region that is probably one of the most lacking in representation from OWL. It appears to me.
Definitely, yeah. That's one of the things that I was thinking about today, and I was talking a little bit. Just because I think SA does have the potential, and a few people really, really undermine the level of play that some of these players are capable of doing. These players also started playing Overwatch when the game came out, just like the NA players, just like the EU, the Korean, the Chinese players. They all started at the same time. They've performed really well in contenders, and they keep that consistently for many of them. But unfortunately, they don't. It doesn't seem like they have as many resources as they could have to really get to that level and to feel like they are competition when it comes to the international arena. So again, yeah, if this is also being broadcasted, if we can see a little more of that talent, I think that would be really, really interesting to see for SA. And I think a lot of people were talking about the Pacific, a little bit out the problems that Australian contenders and Open Division have had recently in this year, which I'm also a little bit aware of. So just taking into account that, really putting the problem and figuring out the solution, and the solution is always going to be giving them a little bit more attention. Every single one of those regions are going to be feel happy if they're able to maybe share with their friends a link of, look, I'm playing here, come watch. Do you also share with their families? I've had conversations with players from SA where they always show and they always talk about how much their family appreciates, where they didn't really understand what they were doing, especially because in SA esports is not really a huge thing right now. It's just still growing. So if they're able to show a little bit more of that, look, there's a link, here's what I'm doing, and yeah, I'm competing on an international level, that's also going to make them happy. It's going to bring more attention to them, which is ideally what they want. These are players that are still want, and they're still hungry to make it to Overwatch League. So if you give them that attention, that would be really, really good for them.
Yeah, I mean, of course, it goes without saying, gamers exist all over the world, not just in specific regions. So, definitely an opening there. And I mean, I've been optimistic that we can get a little bit more globality coming through for Overwatch in terms of just encompassing it all over. But now, we'll kind of take a step back from the Gauntlet for a moment. Um, I guess one final thing that kind of leads into this next point for the Gauntlet, it is that it's going to be running, from the very end of November to around the mid to late-ish December area.
Yeah.
As far as I'm seeing most of these dates line up. Now, we've been seeing that the skins for contenders have been, coming out, every month. New skins have been released, all that kind of good stuff that is good for promoting that
Yeah.
tier 2 Overwatch. I'm curious to see if that's going to be the case for the Contenders Gauntlet as well, or if they'll perhaps have a different set of skins for the event specifically, not necessarily like different colorations or anything, but perhaps new heroes in the Contender skin colors that we haven't seen, or if they're just going to lump it into the December skins.
It would definitely make sense for them to do something about the skins. I didn't really consider the possibility of them bringing maybe like a completely new skin for watching. Just like when you watch Overwatch League Grand Finals, you get the Tracer skin, some sort of that idea. If they bring a new one, I think that would be really, really interesting. That would be a very original idea. But for me, just in general, it makes sense for them to keep going with the same pattern of every month we're going to give certain skins for the heroes they announced. Like we know this month is going to be Lucio and Torbjorn. So if this is for the month of November, that might also count towards that. And for December, when they announce the next two heroes, and having also the possibility of Gauntlet coming as contenders, because at the end of the day, it is contenders.
Now, I want to kind of pick your brain about this, Drag, because this is something that could very easily be user error on my end, or um, just something that perhaps hasn't been panned out by you know team. I'm more inclined to believe the former. Have you been having any issues with your contenders skins? Because I feel like I've been watching a bunch of contenders, but I still haven't gotten the skins, or I haven't quite earned them from last month. I do know that there was like a month rollover within this last week, but even prior to that, it felt like I was really putting in that time, but I'm not sure if it was coming through.
I've always been very, very paranoid about that. It was the same with Overwatch League when I was watching and I wanted to get tokens for watching.
Hmm.
You had absolutely no idea if it was working or not, and I would watch for the entire day, just really hoping I would get the tokens that I need to buy a new like team skin, and then I would just not get anything. So it's been the same. A lot of people talk about this happening in contenders, because I mean this is how Blizzard is bringing more people to watch, promoting that you're getting the skins, but a lot of people are not getting them. I believe most people that I've heard of received that first skin, but getting that Mercy skin was a little bit more challenging. I personally, I know I watched more than 15 hours. I didn't get it. But then again, I really expected that to happen. I usually try to reload and hope for the best, hoping that that's going to fix it. And I know they recently introduced a few settings to make sure that you're actually getting the time towards getting those skins. But there's still a lot of people complaining about last month, and I'm not really sure if there's anything that Blizzard or Overwatch are going to do now to fix that issue that already happened.
I mean, when you put it in context of just outside of contenders, I do realize now like there's always been a little bit of a sweat period when it came to Overwatch League tokens and those things getting awarded properly. Admittedly, it felt like it was less when they were on Twitch, but
Yeah.
now that it's website specific, I'm just not sure. I know that it always says I'm logged in. It says that I'm earning rewards, but there's
Yeah.
there's no
Am
time
I?
tracker. There's no time tracker or anything. It makes it really hard to just gauge and know how true that is.
Yeah, I believe it was last week exactly that they said, oh, we made a few adjustments so you can see. So when you go to the website, I think there's a link or there's a green um dot. So if it's green, it means that
Mhm.
you're receiving them, that you're going to receive them, and the time that you're watching is counting towards that. But um I don't know how much that's working right now. I believe they did make the change because a lot of people were complaining about it, but I feel like it could still be green and not really working. So I'm curious to see again if that issue is going to be fixed. And like you mentioned, when I used to watch Overwatch League on Twitch, I never had an issue. I always got tokens, and I had nothing. But when you're now on YouTube, you have this challenge that you also have to fix, and again, especially when you're promoting contenders, by saying that oh you're gonna get the skins. So if you're
Mhm.
not getting the skins, you're just gonna make people mad because uh, you brought a bunch of people for this, and when they realize it's not working, they might just have a negative view on contenders, right? Which is the last thing that
Yeah.
we want to do now.
Yeah, I mean, we spent a bit of time, I think it was like 10, 15 minutes talking about like the impact of those skins on, contenders and even to the lesser degree, tier 3 and how it kind of helps that promotion, but I mean, it feels like a lot of that will be for nothing. A lot of that theory crafting or that
Yeah.
thought process won't really matter if people feel like, they can't trust the system and
Yeah, exactly.
it's weird. It starts to get into this overriding thing that, feels a little bit more widespread than just the skins in terms of um, I guess, expectations for the game. But I mean, overall, I think that I am hopeful, rather, that there is perhaps something just going on my end. I know that sometimes there was a delay between getting those tokens when I would watch them on the OWL site. So I'm hoping that that's perhaps a little bit more of the case here, that I just haven't perhaps waited long enough. Sometimes there was like a 2 or 3 days where it would take me to get my tokens. So I'm going to be optimistic, hope that that is the case, but we'll just have to see as this issue either ceases to exist or continues on.
Yeah, definitely. And now I think it's good that we move on and we keep talking about contenders, right? But um, let's talk a little bit more about contenders trials. Like it's been happening this past week. The teams have played quite a lot recently, and everyone already has an idea of if you're going to contenders or not. And I think it's really, really good to see. My favorite team that I've been keeping an eye on is Knee Kings from
Yep.
EU.
Yep.
They're so strong. They're so good. They went 5-0, completely dominant. And when we had the opportunity to cast them in one of the interviews, they just said we have no idea what we're doing, and I think the other team also doesn't have any idea what we're doing, so it just works out. That just shows the confidence I love. This is one of my favorite things to see from teams, and I just want to see how they do in contenders in EU. I mean, are they going to be a British Hurricane?
Yeah, I mean, that's I have high hopes for New Kings. I mean, they obviously have some pretty good names on their roster. I mean, Lulsish has been like one of those players that I've recognized since my earliest time watching, like the tier 2. Even
Yeah.
before there was like OWL, I think I recall the name kind of being hovered around for a while, but that may be mismemory. As a team, New Kings definitely came out very strong in their first showing, at least with what,
Um,
with what we saw.
Yeah, they're just so good. And again, I think the question everyone was having when they made the announcement was, are they going to finally take down British Hurricane and their winning streak? Um, I don't think they're going to stump them, but I think it's definitely going to be a challenge. So I'm just curious. You have no idea what's going to happen when they go with that matchup, but
Mhm.
it's something to be on the lookout for. And then there's other teams that we already saw in EU, but it's pretty much the same. Ex Oblivione has been doing good. last time in October they did really good in trials. They got that number one, quote unquote, like spot in
Mhm.
trials. But the time they went into contenders, they just got stumped by everyone. So it's a little bit tough. That shows also the difference between the skills I need in contenders versus trials. And I feel like that also connects with the conversation that I've seen a lot happening in Twitter of people saying is trials also tier two or is it tier
Oh.
three?
Yeah, we kind of touched on that. I think it was a couple days ago, just between you and I,
Yeah.
where I put forth the kind of concept that if you're in contenders, it's very easy to say that that's tier two, and not to be pessimistic about things, but sometimes people just want to make their position a little bit more elevated, their status a little bit more elevated. So they're like, oh well, this is what you have to do. It's a very defined cut in order to make it here versus trials. If you make it into trials, that kind of you know mitigates some of the prestige of being in tier two if it's classified as that, away from those who would be in contenders in a solid definite tier two consideration.
Yeah, exactly. So pretty much if you are a consistent contenders player, you're always going to say trials is tier three. But when you are going back and forth, or when you're just perma stock in trials, like many of these teams, you're just going to say that that's going to be tier two because you feel like you're at that level. So I think it's a conversation that doesn't really have an answer. Again, it's just really going to the perspective of the teams. And as an outsider, that we're not competing for any team. I would just go in the middle. I would say it was like tier 2.5, and then that's it.
Yeah, I mean, if open division's tier three and contenders is two, then it makes sense to put the trials at that nice midpoint there and just kind of split the difference a little bit. But I don't know. I mean, again, it's weird because you have those teams that they do kind of tend to consistently make contenders, but does that mean when they go down into trials that they're now a tier 2.5 team, or do they still have the ability to call themselves a tier two? It's admittedly, this whole process, and by process I mean the whole structure of contenders and trials and open division, how there's so much interflow between them, it feels that it really kind of muddies up like the classifications of how would these teams be classified on, like a a ranking system of on a tier list basically.
Yeah, and again, if you are a good contenders player and you go down to a trials team, you're never gonna admit that you went from tier two to tier three, right? Like if
Yeah.
anything, you're just going to from three to two. That's something that we see happening all the time, but not nothing else. So again, it's just a matter of perspectives and just really figuring it out. Those teams that we were talking about, like Exfilione, those are teams that are the ones that, and like Angry Titans, all those teams that are known for being top level contenders, but are they really? I mean, they've struggled a lot recently to maintain that level or to get to that contenders level again. So that's again once of the a little bit of that those scores that we had when we look at Exfilione. They once again for November they did really good in trials. They went 5-0, just like New Kings under different groups that were competing in, but did they really improve? Did they really make the changes from one month to another? Or is it going to be the same scenario where they look really good? People are looking forward to seeing them in contenders, but the minute they get there, they just get destroyed.
I mean, that's definitely something we're gonna have to like kind of. I think that we're gonna have to kind of keep eyes out for as far as like the team placements, as far as the tier listing goes. We've kind of already discussed that. That's very open to interpretation. But I mean, all of this is just going on within the EU side, right? I mean,
Yeah.
there's an entire other an entire other continent, I guess, for our intents and purposes, that is still worth taking a look at.
Yeah, and that's going to be an A. So
Hmm.
when we look at an A, and when we look at the scores, one of the biggest surprises that I've had watching contenders last month was seeing drifters drop to trials again. I don't think that's something that many people were expecting. They did. I'm not really sure of what's going on behind the scenes, but some of the players, I believe it was Icy, was talking about how it was hard for them to scrim and to have enough time to scrim this month. It might be some trials where we're actually going on. They're a really good team. They're very strong. So I think that's might be one of the reasons why they dropped to trials again. But overall, I think it is as expected. 4-0 so far. They've had a really good they had really good results in trials as expected, they will definitely be going into contenders. And I think one of the biggest surprises that I had in this region was definitely seeing for the side of Uprising Academy. They've struggled so much the last few months, but now they look so strong. I know I saw a tweet from Leg Day saying that he was really excited to cast them since they are just winning and winning over again in trials. This is something that we really haven't seen, so they're definitely making those changes to improve their roster, and they already have the support that they need.
Yeah, I mean, very very captivating there in terms of like things to consider, teams to kind of keep eyes out for. And one team that I thought looked good in the prior that maybe doesn't stand up to as much an eye test now is 200 ms, right? I think that
Yeah.
we didn't quite get to see them on the casts for trials this last week or so, or at
Mhm.
least not often, not you and I for sure. But they did not necessarily come out of this with as sparkling a record as maybe in previous experience would have told us that they would have otherwise.
And everyone was intimidated by this team as well when they announced it. They were a little bit scared, like, oh, this is a full Korean roster. What is going on when they're competing in an A? How are they going to perform? And people had really high expectations, which I think was kind of what is making them really a topic of conversation right now, because when you see all the players being from Korea, you want to have high expectations from them. And it's not that they've been doing bad, but definitely they're not performing at the level that people wanted them to. But once again, I've seen a lot of people talking about this team and how something that happened very unexpectedly, but their scores right now not looking too good. I believe they went 1-4 in trials, and that just means that they will not be going into contenders. So a lot of adaptation that's needed, and this is something that they should have expected when you decide to go against this region.
Yeah, and I mean, we talk about the expectation of this being an entire Korean team, but also just like in the change from October to November, right?
Yeah.
They make it into contenders in October, and they placed, I think, second in their group in trials, if memory serves. Um, but they go into contenders, they get a sixth, seventh, eighth spot, low in the lower portion of things, and then it just seems like they've kind of crumbled a little bit. And part of me wonders, as I do with teams outside of 200 ms, just in general, teams that have a very good showing and then kind of peter off. Um, normally you'd say, well, 200 milliseconds, that's a big lag time, but it didn't
Mhm.
stop them the first time around. It didn't stop them their first time or in their October run in trials. You can't really lean on that as to why that might be the case in November. uh, I always wonder where those things come from within these teams, whether it's just a one-off bad run of the season of the month, because these uh, trials just take place very briefly over a month, or rather within a very short time frame within the month. And there's a lot of times where one if a player or two are having 2 or 3 bad days, it's not unforeseeable that they can really mess up their team's score spread or anything like that. It's not surprising to me, but I also wonder where that change comes from.
Yeah, I think one of the things that I've seen teams really talk about, not only in a contenders level, not only trials level, but even a World League level, is the need to for your team to change and to have a lot of variety into things that they're good at playing. You need to be pretty much good at every single composition that you're going to be playing. So that's why you see the top teams in every region just stay on top, because they're good at adapting. And that's the biggest difference for other teams. Like it might be the case of 200 MS. When they started going into an A, there was a completely different meta going on, and they were really able to make sure it worked for them. But now the meta in an A is a mess. I actually don't even know what's going on for them. We've seen a lot of different things going on, and some teams are able to get away with playing dive. Other teams that get away with playing brawl, and then that sort of weird composition that we see right now. That I'm just trying to understand. Still having that wrecking ball, having Sigma being played, and a lot of different varieties, that if your team is not able to adapt to this in time, not only for the preparation throughout the week before, but also adapting on the spot when you're getting counter over and over again, this is going to affect you. And this is going to happen at any level of Overwatch. It's going to be happening in your competitive games. It's also going to happen in open division, in trials, in contenders, in Overwatch League. The better teams are always going to be the ones that are better at adapting, that have a bigger hero pool. And I believe this is why 200 Mess is struggling so much right now. They believe they do have the capability, but they have to learn the compositions that NA is playing.
Yeah, I mean, there's always like the little bit of caveat, are they scrimming against NA teams? Because if they're not, that's going to put you at a huge disadvantage. But I mean, scrimming with NA teams as a Korean roster, obviously, aside from the connection issues, can still have some benefits to it, right? You learn to cope with those connection issues. You learn to, deal with the high amounts of ping that you might be experiencing. You learn to perhaps get a little bit of a feel for a meta that may not be the same as it is, in Korea. So, very interesting kind of to see how those developments will come underway. But overall, as far as big winners and losers for this, I guess, for contenders across the board, I'm definitely going to be keeping an eye on those new kings in the EU region, if memory serves. And I'm definitely going to be kind of hopeful, but I mean, I guess that'll be for next month. Hopeful that 200 MS kind of picks it back up and keeps themselves within that breath of life.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely possible. Again, a lot of changes that might need to be made, so a little bit more preparation, I think, would be ideal. Figuring out the meta, I think this is something that not only them, but the entire region just has to figure out, because it just feels really weird right now. A lot of people playing different things just because they think they can get away with it, and they have gotten away with it. But we know as the weeks pass, the teams are going to really figure out what's going to be best for everyone, and is going to shift more into that mirror style for both teams competing against each other. So this is something that I'm very curious to see how it's going to develop. Just because of the variety that we've seen so far. Like we were talking yesterday, we were casting a novel, and the team just caught my attention because they were playing dive the entire time, and they almost got away with it. And they were going against Anteku. They were doing so good at playing dive, but it's the only team that I've seen forcing this dive from beginning to end. It's not really expected, but it just shows the great variety of compositions and heroes you can get away with at this level. But the moment that you get into contenders, you just really have to figure out what everyone at your level is playing and make sure that you're playing it better than everyone else.
Optimization truly going to be the name of the game. I think I agree with you as we look forward. However, I do want to take a little bit of a step away here from now, even that tier 2.5 and the tier 3, as we talk about open division trials, contenders, all that stuff. Do want to give you guys a little bit of a pause and remind you folks that if you're liking the podcast, make sure to support our sponsors, Vite Ramen. If you're feeling so inclined for some tasty ramen, you can use the code DOODLES on the website, DOODLES. Rhymes with noodles, appropriate, I think, for 10% off of the order today. As well, great news here, Zero Issue launching the merch store. You can catch it at zeroissue.gg/store. A bunch of awesome things like hoodies, stickers, mugs. I wish somebody had told me that there was a mug out there for Zero Issue. I definitely would have popped that in, get my tea going in that instead of just this standard one. But if you use the code launch at checkout, you'll get 10% off of all orders over $10. That will expire by the 20th, though, at 11:59. So make sure you get it in when you can. If you're not necessarily feeling the need to buy anything, you can also support us on Patreon, patreon.com/0issue. Not required, but we do want to show our support for anybody who may be so inclined. All the money given through that Patreon will be donated or dedicated to events like this, making sure that this podcast can continue on, going back into the community events as well for Zero Issue. So not being greedy here. We're just making sure that we can keep doing these things that the Overwatch community, at least we think, needs.
Yeah, and again, it's really cool that this can even happen, just because I feel like in this spot that we're right now, where contenders. People were complaining a lot about contenders before, about that tier 2, tier 3 scene, and really figuring out if they wanted to stay in the community or not. And then getting a lot of support from Blizzard is going to bring more people. So the fact that we're able to talk about this to you guys for a little bit, I think it's really, really cool, and it's a really cool opportunity.
I definitely agree. And we're not quite done yet. However, there is at least one more topic, Andrea, that I definitely want to get onto that I think that you and I kind of have some firsthand knowledge, at least from the outside. We are the casters of the glass box, if you will. And that's collegiate in Overwatch. We talk about tier 2, 3. Collegiate, though, I've learned is not necessarily tier 4. It's more like it feels an array of tiers, right? It's finally these schools getting into esports, and that doesn't necessarily allow for the most consistent of gameplay across all the different I guess ranks.
This is yeah, one of the things that we talked about a little bit and about collegiate, why it's just always feels weird. It just every single time it just feels like from what we've seen, there's a decent amount of support coming from the schools, but it doesn't seem like it's just quite enough for some. So it struggles a lot, mainly because it's not really figure out how much these people want to support the scene. There's been a lot of players in Overwatch League that started playing collegiate, and just like that, they realized they're good. Moth from the San Francisco Shock, I know he was playing in his university team, and then he was just really good at that. Now he's in San Francisco Shock. So this is one of the few cases that we've seen where this is able to help us that connection from players to get to a higher level, but overall it still struggles just because there's a lot of disparity when you are joining a university. It's not really one of the main things that you consider in comparison to other sports. So many sports players join universities because they get a scholarship to join because they're really good at certain sport, football, soccer, whatever it is, and they're able to get away with this. But for esports, you never know if your university is going to have six top 500 players, or you're going to have six plat players that are interested in the team. And again, there's a lot of differences in the skill. I personally have that experience in my own university where the highest star player was around 4K, and everyone else was all the way down until about gold or silver.
Wow. Got it.
And it just happens over and over again, but they do like competing, and they are committed to make this tournament happen. They have a little bit of fun with it, but they're not every single player is going to be committed to be top number one, or they don't have the support that they need, maybe, or they're not really necessarily interested in getting that support to become a better player. They're just doing this for fun because they like Overwatch and they like the esports um, that they can get from the university. So and that's one of the things that we definitely need to consider when we look at why doesn't necessarily work, why it's not really reliable for certain players.
And I would say that for myself, the biggest concern I have in terms of esports and collegiate and things like that is that you know we are, at least myself, there was a time where I believed, like, we should start treating esports like a physical sport, in the
Yeah.
colleges, like an active sport, if you prefer, like the footballs, basketballs, um really trying to promote them, and even potentially scholarships through that. But as I've kind of gotten away from the college environment, I've realized, like, there's a lot of things that even with physical sports are very problematic in terms of student athletes. There's a whole lot of controversies that can be noted from those communities, and I'm really hopeful that esports, if they do kind of invest more into the collegiate scene, are able to skirt away from it, or not skirt away, but avoid it, and try to perhaps learn from those issues. I remember hearing, I think, Jane talk about this a while ago, where a lot of players will, if in the hopes of becoming pro, will kind of put their more practical careers, for lack of a better word, on the back burner. And that seems real short sighted to me. But if we kind of go in the way of a lot of student athletes, that can also easily be said for some football players who are trying to make it go pro, or some basketball players who are trying to get into the NBA, or what have you. I think that that's not necessarily going to be as big a concern as immediately, but it's something that I do hope collegiate kind of takes focus on, because if there's not a good support system for those esports, and if there's nothing that will make the players feel like it's valuable, then they're just not going to go after it.
Yeah, and I do have an example for this. And yeah, is that discussion of, do universities consider esports as an actual sport that they can support, that they can give scholarships to? There are some big universities out there that do this, and this is catching a lot of attention for some players that don't necessarily want to quit. They maybe do want to go to college, they want to pursue a career, but they also want to have an opportunity playing Overwatch or playing any other game. So I had the opportunity to have an interview with a Colombian player who played for the Overwatch Cup 2 years ago or 1 year ago. His name is Dula, and he was telling me that the way that he got this is that he was a really good Overwatch player. Really good, and he was very known in Colombia and also in an international level. And what happened to him was that he got an offer from a university in Mexico that I don't really remember the name of the university, but the university was really, really trying to push esports. So they offered him a scholarship to join, and they offered a lot of support that he could get along with the rest of the team that would be part of Overwatch. They were the best in the region. They were competing also for against teams in an A, and they were doing really, really good performing. And it just shows that when your university gives the resources necessary for these players to really get better, then it's definitely possible for you to even get some value, maybe some economic value that you want to, or the side the university sees. Because when you are considering all these options of including esports as part of the sport, and when you're in a university, when you're the head of a university, what you want to see is how much you can profit for it, but also how much you can support your students. And this university did a really, really good job doing so. Now I believe Dula has moved into Valorant, because he believes that there was a little bit of a weird support from Blizzard coming, that from for the scene,
Mhm.
that he just wanted to try some other things. So that's exactly what happened. But he is still going to this university. He's still getting support, and the roster around him was just built to make sure that they had the opportunity to really compete at the highest level. And if this this is something that is going to happen in the future, where we're going to see universities competing and recruiting players because of your level. I think esports is going to take a really big step forward.
Well, I think that that's definitely going to be something to keep eyes on in the future. I mean, I'm always a fan of, if it happens a little bit sooner, and it's a little bit better. But I know I do. It's probably going to take some time. It's probably not going to happen within the next 4 months, despite how much anybody might want it to. But overall, Dryad, I think we are just about closing up on all the time we have left. I guess with some real quick stuff that we could go over. And I say real quick, but there's always the potential for this conversation to go a little bit long. We did see the recent Overwatch patch go through. I've been calling it the 25 HP patch, where we've started to see those micro adjustments for the different heroes come through.
Yeah.
I'm really excited, honestly, to see how these kind of affect the heroes, and if that's more reflective of a mindset at Blizzard.
In general, I think it's a very, very interesting patch, and people are just questioning how effective it is, just because changing the health pool of heroes don't necessarily fix the issues that they might have. But yeah, there's a lot of heroes that got a few changes, but I think everyone is talking about Brig. Everyone is talking about how Brig is really strong now. As some middle making the angry videos again, and all the stuff happening just because Brig is the is a character that everyone talked about. Personally, I think Moira is more of a annoying character to deal with.
Mhm.
But when you are at the highest level and you think that Brig is a problem, is something that you need to listen to. And everyone else, I believe Widowmaker didn't really make a difference. I mean, it's a little bit more risky if you get um, dove right away by a diva, by a tracer, is going to be hard to be alive. But then again, you don't have much of an opportunity to stay alive anyways if the team is already diving you.
Yeah.
So again, that's why it just feels weird to have that change into the 25 HP. doesn't really feel like it's doing much so far. But I'm wondering if this is kind of like the first step towards something else that Overwatch wants to do in the future.
I'm certainly optimistic that that's going to be the case. I mean, it's been said, within the last couple of, I'd say months, probably within the last 6 or 8 months, that Blizzard's been making a lot of changes that are smaller in nature, so they're not just widespread and giving three heroes reworks at the same time. They're doing these very granular changes, and I think that's a fair aspect to take from it. um, I guess one final point I would have to say in regards to this patch, is that one of the characters I'm actually most excited for, and I don't think that there may be as many people who share this opinion, but I really like the changes that are going to come out from May, just because we already see her kind of coming out as a rarer but not incredibly rare pick from some of those higher level tier 2, tier 3 teams. Just for the ice wall, for the cryo freeze, and now that
Yeah.
she's getting some buffs, I'm hoping we're going to see a little bit more of that. I love the May wall plays.
Yeah, I think that's the biggest highlight, right? Because when you think about May being played, not many players and teams are really going to enjoy that. They don't really, they always make the comparison of May being the double and whatnot. So it's really interesting. But I really, really like seeing maps like Lijiang Control Center,
Oh
or
yeah.
like in maps like maybe specific parts of Oasis of Nepal, where a lot of May comes through, and I think it's really, really fun. Like you mentioned, those May walls, one of my favorite things to see every single time, just the way that you need to isolate the players, take them down, and just play around this. A lot of people say that this May wall works more as a shield, and it's just interesting to see what teams are able to come up with. So I do think it's going to be interesting to see. But May, I feel like it's always going to be that hero that he can play in very specific maps, but it's not going to be meta maybe for every single one of them.
Yeah, certainly. And I like that kind of concept when it comes to Overwatch is, not every hero is going to be good in every single position. I think that that's something that, is a good thing to lean into if you're Blizzard, trying to avoid just, the one character being the jack of all trades, although it's a little bit ironic that Soldier was once very much so defined that way as being kind of good at everything, but not
Right.
very, very good at any one specific thing. And now we see him a bunch. Now it just feels like ever since the recoil changes, he's been all over the place. But we'll see if that continues to be the pace here for Blizzard as we look ahead.
Yeah, definitely. And I mean, about Soldier, I just think people are still playing him because they haven't really figured out what's meta. They haven't really figured out the specific meta that every team is going to play in probably a few weeks. But overall, I think that the Tracer Echo that we've seen a few teams play is very, very strong, and a lot of teams like playing it. They just have to get used to it, and then that the Soldier is going to come through to counter the Echo. So there's a few of the changes that we've seen. I'm not sure how long we're going to keep seeing Soldier, or if maybe Blizzard is going to try to nerf him again. I think it's a possibility.
I don't know. We'll find out. Blizzard's certainly going to have their own plans brewing, especially as we look closer towards potentially seeing that Overwatch 2 come out, sometime in the future. But I think that's
Sometime.
about, yeah, some eventually
I
it'll
think we
hit.
did now.
But that's unfortunately going to be all the as we're talking about time. That's going to be all the time we have for today here at the Zero Issue Podcast. Once again, you want to show us a little bit of the supports? Go to the Vite Ramen website, code Doodles merch store as well. Get all your Zero Issue merch if you're feeling so inclined to launch for 10% off any offer over $10, and then Patreon always available /Zero Issue if you want to show your support that way as well. Any ideas, please give any feedback at Ping Haitian or at Zero Issue on Twitter. We love hearing from you guys. We like hearing your opinions on what we gotta say. But it's gonna be about time to wrap it up here, Dryad. So I've been Sir Waltham. You can catch me at Sir Waltham on Twitter.
Yeah, and you can catch me as Andrea on Twitter.
All right. Well, thank you, folks, once again for tuning in. We hope to see you in a couple of weeks. Until then, stay tuned in.